You don't realize it at first, but something inside you has finally shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, almost like a decision your soul made before your mind could catch up. You stop reaching out. You stop checking your phone every few minutes. You stop replaying every conversation, trying to decode what went wrong. And for the first time in a long time, you choose silence, not as a strategy, but as a form of self-respect. And in that exact moment, something begins on the other side that you can't see yet. Because what most people misunderstand is this: when you go silent, you're not the only one experiencing a shift. The avoidant feels it too, just not in the way you expect. At first, it looks like nothing has changed. No message, no reaction, no sign that your absence matters. And that's the part that messes with your mind the most, because you start questioning everything. Was it ever real? Did they even care? Did you mean anything at all? But here's the truth that most people don't tell you: silence doesn't mean indifference, especially not here. In fact, your silence is the one thing they didn't prepare for. They were prepared for your emotions, your messages, your attempts to fix things, your presence, but they were not prepared for your absence. And that's where everything begins to turn. The moment you pull away, something subtle but powerful happens inside them. Not relief, not closure, but a kind of emotional confusion they don't immediately understand, because for so long the dynamic had a rhythm. You would reach, they would pull back, you would try to get closer, they would create distance. It was predictable, safe, in a strange way, but now that pattern is broken, and when the pattern breaks, the control they quietly relied on starts slipping, and they don't like that feeling. Not because they consciously want to control you, but because emotional distance was the one thing that made them feel secure, and now, without realizing it, you've taken that away simply by doing nothing. But here's where it gets even more surprising. In the beginning, they may actually feel something that looks like freedom. A lightness, a sense that the pressure is gone. No more expectations, no more emotional intensity, no more having to respond or explain or show up in ways that made them uncomfortable. And for a brief moment, they convince themselves that this is what they wanted all along. Space, distance, independence. It feels like relief, like they can finally breathe again. And if you could see them in this phase, you might think, they're perfectly fine without me, and that thought would hurt deeply. But that feeling doesn't last as long as they expect, because what they don't realize is that the pressure they felt wasn't just pressure, it was also connection, it was also presence, it was also you. And when that disappears completely, the silence starts to feel different. Not freeing anymore, but unfamiliar. And then slowly it becomes uncomfortable, because even though they avoided emotional closeness, they still got used to your energy being there, your attention, your care, your consistency. It became something they didn't fully appreciate while it was there, but they definitely notice when it's gone. And this is where the silence begins to work in a way you can't see. Because now, instead of them reacting to you, they're reacting to the absence of you, and that's a completely different experience. There's no message to ignore, no emotion to withdraw from, no conversation to escape, just space. And that space starts forcing something they've been avoiding for a long time: their own thoughts. At first, it's subtle. A random moment where they think about you for no reason, a small curiosity about what you might be doing, a quiet question in their mind they don't say out loud, and they brush it off. They tell themselves it doesn't mean anything, that it's normal, that it will pass. But it doesn't pass as easily as they thought, because something else is starting to grow underneath that surface-level calm, and it's something they weren't expecting at all. Because deep down, without even realizing it, they assumed something. They assumed that you would come back, that eventually you would reach out again, that the silence would break just like it always did before, that no matter how much distance they created, you would still be there at the end of it. That was the unspoken expectation, not something they admitted, not something they consciously planned, but something they felt, a quiet certainty that the connection wouldn't truly disappear because you wouldn't let it. And now that expectation is being challenged, because this time the silence continues. And the longer it continues, the more that quiet certainty begins to crack. And when that crack appears, something deeper starts to rise. Not panic right away, but a kind of internal tension, because now it's no longer about space, it's about uncertainty. And uncertainty is something they struggle with more than anything else, because distance gave them control, but your absence takes that control away. And this is where the real shift begins, because now it's not just about you pulling away, it's about them starting to feel something they didn't plan for, something they didn't prepare for, something they don't even fully understand yet. And the truth is, this is only the beginning. And as the uncertainty settles in, a quiet battle begins inside them. It's subtle, almost invisible, but it's happening with every thought and feeling they try to suppress. Their pride says one thing: stay distant, maintain independence, don't reach out, but their emotions whisper another. That whisper grows louder each day you stay silent. Suddenly they find themselves analyzing every small memory, replaying every interaction, trying to make sense of why things are different this time. And in those moments, even though they would never admit it aloud, a seed of longing begins to form, a small, confusing tug at the heart that they can neither fully deny nor completely embrace. It's a feeling that surprises them because they thought they had moved past it, that they had closed that part of themselves off forever. But the truth is, absence has a way of pulling emotions to the surface, whether they're ready for it or not. At first, it comes as a strange, almost annoying curiosity, a passing thought about you, a fleeting wonder of what you might be doing, who you might be with, and whether you're truly moving on. They try to dismiss it. They tell themselves it doesn't matter, that it's just a habit of thinking about someone they once knew. But the more days pass, the stronger the thoughts become. That curiosity starts turning into subtle longing, a quiet awareness that something is missing, and they don't know why. Because they've been conditioned to avoid emotional dependence, to hide vulnerability, and to convince themselves that they are better off without being too attached. But your absence is forcing them to confront a part of themselves they've always avoided, the part that actually misses connection, that actually values emotional closeness, even if they rarely admit it. And then comes the creeping unease, the quiet moments when they catch themselves expecting something from you, a text, a call, any sign that you're still present in their life, and it doesn't come. That expectation was so ingrained, so automatic, that the silence feels like a shock to the system. For the first time, they realize that maybe you won't come back right away, maybe things have changed, maybe the certainty they always counted on is gone. And that realization is uncomfortable in ways they didn't anticipate, because avoidants often rely on distance to feel safe, to maintain control over their emotions. But now, the safety net has vanished, and they are forced to feel uncertainty. And it's not just discomfort, it's a quiet panic that grows with every passing hour of silence. Soon, they start to notice patterns they didn't want to see. They remember the small moments that used to frustrate them, but also secretly drew them in. The laughter, the attention, the way you made them feel understood without demanding anything in return. Those memories start playing in loops, and each time a small ache forms, not just missing you, but missing the connection itself, that sense of energy between you, the subtle ways your presence shaped their world, becomes tangible in its absence, and it hits harder than anything they've consciously acknowledged. The ironic part is that they spent so long avoiding intimacy to protect themselves, and now it's exactly that emotional closeness they avoided that they are starting to miss the most. And this is when subtle behaviors begin to emerge. They may start checking on you indirectly without realizing it. A glance at your social media, a casual question to a mutual friend, even listening for your name in passing conversations. They are not ready to confront the emotions head-on, but their mind seeks reassurance. Their subconscious wants evidence that you are still a part of their world in some way. And each of these small, secret actions brings a mix of relief and frustration. Relief because they feel connected again, even indirectly, and frustration because the connection is not direct and their pride prevents them from reaching out. It's a tension that feels uncomfortable, unfamiliar, and unavoidable all at once. And while they are doing this, another process is quietly unfolding: reflection. They start to replay old patterns, old arguments, old disagreements, trying to understand what went wrong or what could have been different. But it's not just about fault-finding, it's about emotional processing that they rarely allow themselves. For so long they avoided these moments, pushing feelings aside, denying attachment, protecting themselves through detachment. But your absence forces them to face these emotions slowly and reluctantly, and with every memory and reflection, something shifts inside, not immediately, not dramatically, but steadily. A recognition begins to emerge that the connection they tried to avoid losing is actually more significant than they thought, and the awareness that it could be gone forever is both terrifying and enlightening in equal measure. And then comes the fear, a quiet, subtle fear that creeps in when no one is watching. The fear of being forgotten, not by the world, not by their friends, but by you. They might never admit it out loud, and in fact they might convince themselves that they don't care. But the reality is that absence exposes a deep vulnerability they rarely acknowledge. That fear grows slowly, almost imperceptibly, until it is impossible to ignore. It's a fear of losing the bond, of realizing too late that what they had was rare, valuable, and not easily replaced. And this fear is what makes the emotional tension so intense. It's not longing alone, it's longing mixed with anxiety, with the recognition that they no longer hold the comfort of certainty they once assumed was theirs. And finally, in these quiet moments of reflection and unease, they begin to replay the connection in their mind with a new intensity, not selectively, not just the good memories, but a holistic replay, the laughter, the frustration, the intimacy, the small gestures that made you both feel known. And in doing this, emotions that were buried under layers of detachment rise to the surface. They are confronted with feelings they have spent years avoiding, attachment, care, and the undeniable weight of what your absence has created. The realization is both confusing and undeniable. They start to understand, without wanting to admit it, that your absence is having a profound effect. And that finally is when the emotional shift is undeniable. Curiosity becomes longing, reflection becomes recognition, and absence becomes a force they cannot ignore. And as these feelings settle deeper, something unexpected begins to emerge. They start to realize, almost subconsciously, that they can't control the situation anymore. Every attempt to suppress curiosity, to dismiss emotions, to maintain the familiar distance, it begins to fail. That quiet confidence they carried, the belief that they could remain detached indefinitely, begins to erode. And with that erosion comes a subtle fear that they've never fully faced, the fear of losing you entirely. It's not about losing control over themselves, not about being forced into closeness, but losing the energy, the presence, the essence of you in their life. And that fear, unacknowledged and quiet, begins to pull at their heart in ways they don't yet understand. They begin to notice moments when your absence stings more than it should. A simple thought, a passing memory, even something as small as a familiar song or a phrase that reminds them of you triggers an unanticipated response. It's like a small shockwave in their chest, a reminder that what they avoided losing has value they hadn't fully appreciated, and yet they struggle to name it, to admit it, or to even process it consciously. For them, acknowledging this feeling feels vulnerable, uncomfortable, almost dangerous. They've been trained by their own patterns to protect themselves by staying distant. But now every layer of protection feels inadequate, because absence is a force they cannot ignore, and silence is a mirror showing them what they've been missing all along. And then comes the undeniable longing. It starts small, almost imperceptible, like a whisper at the back of their mind. They find themselves imagining what it would be like if you were still around, not to confront, not to demand, but simply to exist in that shared energy again. It's a longing for presence, not control. And that's what makes it so powerful, so emotionally disarming, because it's not an attachment they can easily rationalize away. It is not about wanting to dominate or manipulate. It is about the simple, human need for connection they've spent so long denying. And as that longing grows, they start to feel something more, a subtle but undeniable ache that your absence has created in their daily life. They begin to play mental scenarios, testing the boundaries without ever reaching out. What if I just sent a small message? What if I just made sure they were okay? They don't act, not yet, because their pride, their fear, and their internal rules hold them back. But the mental rehearsal itself is telling. It's the subconscious starting to signal that they notice, that they care, that they are no longer indifferent, and in that process their mind begins to acknowledge something they've never fully admitted, that the space you've created has not left them empty, it has left them aware of how much they truly value you. And that awareness, while uncomfortable, is the first crack in the emotional armor they have built around themselves. And in parallel, a quiet fear of forgetting starts to take hold. They fear losing not just you, but the impact you've had on their life. They worry that the energy, the intimacy, the small moments that once defined your connection could fade without your presence to remind them. And that fear drives subtle behaviors, checking social media without engagement, asking indirect questions, holding back from making contact, but still seeking reassurance in secret ways. And with each passing day of no contact, this fear grows stronger, silently demanding recognition. The irony is that the very distance they sought to maintain for comfort now produces anxiety they cannot control, a longing they cannot dismiss, and a vulnerability they have avoided for so long. And then comes the memory replay, intense and unavoidable. It is no longer selective nostalgia that comforts or deceives them. It's a full-bodied recollection of your shared energy, your laughter, your conversations, the small gestures that made you present in their life. And with each memory, the emotions intensify. There's frustration because they don't want to feel this way. There's pride resisting the pull, telling themselves to maintain distance. But there's also undeniable recognition that what you created together was significant, rare, and meaningful, and absence magnifies it, transforming the ordinary into something profound. They begin to understand, slowly and often unwillingly, that your presence wasn't just convenient or casual, but essential to the emotional rhythm they've grown accustomed to, even if they never admitted it before. And finally, they are confronted with a simple truth that surprises them. They want to feel the connection again. Not to control, not to demand, not to rewrite the past, but to feel the energy of you in their life. Your absence has created a tension they cannot easily ignore, and as they sit with it, alone with their thoughts, something remarkable happens. They begin to recognize that it's not about changing you or forcing closeness. It's about the realization that they underestimated your importance, that your presence mattered more than they allowed themselves to admit, and that no contact has revealed a part of themselves they have long denied, the part that wants connection, care, and the presence of someone they can't easily replace. And then comes the moment they finally consider reaching out. It doesn't come as a sudden declaration or a dramatic gesture. It starts as a quiet thought, a small testing of the waters. Maybe I should just see how they are. Even then, pride holds them back. Their mind races with caution. I can't appear needy, I can't show I was affected. And yet, beneath that careful calculation, a deeper truth pulses stronger than any fear. They miss the connection. They crave the energy you bring into their life. And that craving, subtle at first, grows in intensity until it becomes undeniable. The silence you created has worked in ways they could not anticipate. It has shown them the depth of their feelings without a single word exchanged. When they finally make a move, it is never as simple as sending a straightforward message. There's hesitation, indirectness, a careful testing of emotional boundaries. It may be a casual greeting, a short text, a message that seems innocent on the surface but carries a quiet weight. They are not yet ready to fully expose their vulnerability. Their pride and fear of emotional exposure remain. But even in these small steps, the shift is clear. Your absence has awakened something that words alone cannot explain. And every small response they receive, every acknowledgement from you, feeds a recognition they've been avoiding. The recognition that the connection matters deeply, that it shaped them, and that it cannot be replaced by distance or detachment. But the return is often confusing for you. One moment, there's warmth, attention, subtle care. The next, they pull back, guarded, distant. This push-pull pattern can feel frustrating, bewildering, even painful, and yet it is not a reflection of your worth or of their true feelings. It is a reflection of the internal battle they are waging: pride versus vulnerability, fear versus longing, avoidance versus the undeniable pull of connection. And if you watch closely, you will notice the subtle signs of change, the slight openness in tone, the willingness to engage, the small admissions that were once impossible. These are the markers of a shift, one that was catalyzed entirely by your absence, by the space you created, and by the power of silence. And as they navigate these moments, a deeper understanding begins to emerge, an unspoken realization of what they have wanted all along. It wasn't control, it wasn't detachment, it wasn't avoidance. What they secretly craved was emotional safety, a connection without pressure, space without losing meaning, freedom without losing significance, and in the absence you maintained, this need became undeniable. They began to see that the connection itself, not the circumstances around it, was what mattered most. They realize that they cannot simply ignore it, and they cannot push it away, because it has become a part of their emotional reality that cannot be dismissed. And finally, there is a truth that changes everything, for them and for the dynamic between you. No contact isn't about manipulation, strategy, or forcing anyone to return. It is about reclaiming your power, your presence, and your own emotional integrity. It is about allowing absence to do the work that words, explanations, or chasing never could. And in that process, they experience a revelation they never expected. The moment you stop needing them, the moment you reclaim your own energy fully, is the moment they feel your presence most profoundly. The dynamic shifts not because of anything they do, but because you have created space that allows them to recognize the depth of their own feelings and the impact you have had on them. And that ultimately is what surprises them the most. And in this final stage, everything comes full circle. The initial silence that felt like a void transforms into a powerful force. It has revealed hidden fears, unspoken longings, and suppressed emotions. It has made them confront parts of themselves they avoided for years. It has clarified what mattered, what was missed, and what cannot be ignored, and as they navigate this internal landscape, they find themselves changed, aware of their attachment, conscious of their avoidance patterns, and inevitably drawn toward the connection they once took for granted, all because you stepped back, remained firm in your presence, and let the power of absence do the work that presence alone never could. Even after weeks, or even months of emotional avoidance, there comes a moment that catches them off guard. It's quiet at first, almost imperceptible, a subtle ache in the chest that can't be ignored. They realize that distance, no matter how carefully measured, never gave them what they truly craved. The freedom they once felt was an illusion. The walls they built to protect themselves only blocked the very thing that made them feel alive: connection. Suddenly, memories that they thought were insignificant or irritating start to flood their mind, each one carrying a weight they can no longer dismiss. The laughter, the shared moments, the small gestures that once seemed ordinary, they now feel irreplaceable. And in that moment of clarity, they confront a truth they had been avoiding for years. Connection is not weakness, and emotional presence is not something to fear. The absence you created revealed the depth of what they've been missing, and it's a truth that shakes them to their core. It's a moment of awakening, silent yet profound, where control no longer feels safe, and the value of authentic emotional connection becomes undeniable. There's an invisible shift that happens next, one that they may never say aloud, one that they may even try to suppress. Deep inside, a quiet gratitude begins to rise, a feeling they don't want to label or fully acknowledge because vulnerability has always felt dangerous. But it's there, persistent, subtle, and impossible to ignore. They feel grateful for your patience, for your boundaries, for the way you allowed yourself to step back instead of chasing, pleading, or compromising your own worth. Your silence, paradoxically, became a gift, a mirror reflecting what they have been blind to in themselves, a space forcing them to face emotions they spent years running from. With each passing day of no contact, that gratitude grows quietly in their heart. It's not about pride, ego, or victory. It's about recognition. recognition that your presence and even your absence was never casual or meaningless, and that awareness begins to soften something deep inside them, breaking down the last layers of defense they thought were untouchable. Finally, there comes a culmination, an awakening that cannot be ignored. It is slow, subtle, yet profoundly transformative. They begin to understand, often with a mix of awe and regret, that emotional connection cannot be manufactured, coerced, or controlled. It is not something that distance or avoidance can replace. Your absence has taught them a lesson no words or arguments ever could. True connection cannot be forced, it can only be felt. And with that realization comes a quiet shift in perspective. They begin to see their own patterns, their avoidance, their fear of intimacy, and the ways they inadvertently pushed away what mattered most. This understanding reshapes not just how they feel toward you, but how they perceive attachment and vulnerability in every area of their life. They may still struggle, still pull back at times, still wrestle with old habits, but the awareness remains. They now see that love is not control, presence is not possession, and the energy you bring to a relationship is far more powerful than anything else. And in that realization they are changed forever, aware of their own heart in ways they never allowed themselves to be before, and finally able to grasp the true impact of what you have brought into their life.